morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Fuller. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Columbus Chamber Foundation, and it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this morning's discussion with Ahola with the Chamber of Commerce Business Edge Initiative. Today, the topic we're going to be hearing from our friends Tina and Jordan is about pay transparency, specifically in the Columbus area, but beyond that as well. And the importance of not just when pay transparency is codified, but also how do we approach a more transparent and a more inclusive environment when we are hiring and retaining people? And what is the importance of being upfront and clear about what the pay and opportunities for advancement look like in our organizations? So I wanted to remind everyone, if you've been here before, or if this is the first time visiting our Business Edge series, we ask that you go into the chat with any questions you may have in the next 45 minutes to an hour. And at the very end, we'll address your questions with Tina and Jordan. So again, welcome. And I'm going to turn it over to my friends, Tina and Jordan at Ahola now. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Kelly. Just a quick introduction. My name is Tina Stuart-McGinty, so I am an HR consultant with Ahola. I've been here for about 2 years, but I've been within the HR industry for probably about the last 11 years. And then Jordan is going to be my co-host here today.
Hi guys, I'm Jordan. I have been with Ahola for just over 2 years as well, and I've been in the industry for, I was just trying to figure that out, probably 6 or 7 years. You lose count. It all just blends together, but I'm really excited to share this information with you today. So just to get into it, I'm not sure how many of you know about Ahola, but we are actually the oldest family-run payroll company in the United States. Our slide says 55, but it actually needs to be updated to 57 years. And we have served the Cleveland area for the majority of that time, but now we've really expanded into Columbus, and we're actually in all 50 states as well, working there. So being family owned has been great. We've serviced over 10,000 small businesses, and we process over 60,000 paychecks a year or annually. So something that's really awesome that we're really proud of. All right, so we're gonna go over the agenda right now. So first, we're going to define pay transparency, learning the difference between full and partial transparency, and explore real world examples, because that's always important. Explain compliance considerations under the federal and state and local governments, pay transparency, and how to ensure your business is compliant. Benefits of pay transparency, discover how pay transparency can promote fairness, reduce that pay gap, and enhance employee morale, which is something I think all of us would love. Challenges and solutions. So we're going to address potential challenges such as internal resistance and confidentiality concerns, and learn effective strategies to overcome them, because obviously that's why you guys are here. And then we're gonna how to implement the pay transparency, explore steps to access your current pay structure, establish comprehensive compensation policies, and effectively communicate challenges, effectively communicate changes to your employees. And then as a legal disclaimer, we, even though we're giving you all this advice, we are not attorneys. Just want to remind you of that. This is for educational information purposes only. We do hope you find this presentation helpful and informative, but the information presented today should not in any way be considered legal advice, even though I'm not a lawyer, even though that would be really nice. Definitely you need to consult with your business advisor or your lawyer on how to effectively apply some of these new changes and just to kind of double check with them.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. So let's segue now into the top of the agenda, which is talking about what pay transparency is. So pay transparency is really referring to sharing of information about wages, right? And so this can be done between an employer and their applicants. This can be done between an employer and their employees, or it can even go so far as being shared with the public. So as we'll talk about later in the conversation, you'll see that there are some states and municipalities that require certain levels of pay transparency. That's not always across the board, but some do. And some people take, or I should say some organizations take pay transparency much further than just maybe posting a salary range in a job ad. So some places really want to commit to it, and they will go so far as, again, sharing pay ranges with specific positions. And so let's talk a little bit about the difference between full and partial transparency. So full transparency is not super common. This is really when organizations are really pretty much taking all of their salary data across their positions and just sharing it with everybody. Usually everybody internally, and a lot of times that can be externally as well. And so this is something, I mean, there's benefits to doing it, but obviously a lot of organizations don't want to go quite so far as showing it down to the particular position and what each position makes. But there are some organizations that are have been noted for doing that. So like Whole Foods is one, Trader Joe's is another, that they have been ranked very high in their percentage of pay transparency. Aldi kind of rolls up in there as well. I don't know about you guys, but pretty much anytime I drive by the Aldi in my town, if they're hiring, they'll have signs out in the front that say exactly what the starting range is and exactly what people can make. So it's something that it's well known. And it's something that people just can understand going into a position there, what it is that they would be able to make. But then we have partial transparency, and partial transparency is what we'll talk a little bit more about today. It is a lot more common, but there's still varying degrees to it. So again, for some organizations, partial transparency looks like posting that salary ad on the job ad when they're hiring on Indeed. For some organizations, it looks more like being more communicative with their employees about how salary decisions are made. And for other organizations, it might be that, well, maybe in your department, you know what the salary ranges are for the different tiers of employees, but you might not know that for other departments or maybe for the executives in your company. So there are a couple of different ways that you can kind of slice and dice pay transparency. But at the end of the day, the overall goal is really to make sure that we're, again, communicating more with our staff on what pay is, how these decisions are made, and promoting better pay equity. Because if we're having sound decisions up front, that's going to make sound decisions later on down the road when we're adjusting somebody's pay, promoting them, making changes. And so there has been an uptick in the trends around pay transparency lately. And I think a lot of that is driven by two things. I think one is because there is changing legislation. So again, we'll talk about that here in a minute. But also I think a lot of organizations are starting to see the benefits of at least some level of pay transparency, and that's driving them to even get ahead of some of the legislation that's coming to their areas. So something that we'll kind of continue to talk about today. Couple of quick stats here. So 42% of HR professionals said their organization operates in a location that requires pay ranges to be included in job postings. So again, just a stat to kind of reinforce that these changes are coming. So even if they haven't hit maybe all of the areas in which you have employees today, that doesn't mean that it won't be there tomorrow. I know that even in looking into 2025, there are a lot of new states and municipalities that are moving towards pay transparency laws. And then even when not required by law, 67% of HR professionals say that their organization voluntarily lists starting pay at least some of the time, maybe not always, but at least some of the time. And again, this goes back to my point that I think a lot of organizations are trying to get ahead of these things and they're seeing the benefits of it. So they're just going to go ahead and kind of do it anyway. So although there has been a lot of conversation recently, again, around these pay transparency acts, this isn't just a new trend that's starting, right? So legislation around equal pay goes back a ways. So if we're going to kind of look at this a little bit more holistically, I want to take us back to the Equal Pay Act of 1963. So this was a law that was signed into effect that said employees working at the same establishment cannot be discriminated against by their employer based on their sex for jobs that require substantially equal skill, effort, responsibility, and that are performed under similar working conditions. So you see I have similar and substantially equal bolded, and that's intentional. That means that it does not have to be the exact same job. So jobs that are similar enough need to be equal and be paid equitably across your organization. And so this also covers, it's worth noting, all forms of compensation. So total compensation, we're not just talking about someone's base salary. In this, we're considering things like vacation, commission, overtime pay, bonuses. Those types of things need to be treated equal as well. And if an organization takes a look at things in their company and they see disparities, it is illegal for them to take the higher paid employee and bring them down to the lower paid employee. So if there are discrepancies that are discovered based on sex, they have to take the lower paid employee up to that status of that higher employee. So that's how they would kind of fix those differences that might exist. And when you're looking in your organization and you're starting to go through these motions of trying to understand what if people are treated or if the jobs are similar, if they're substantially equal, you really need to look at the actual job factors. So you can look at job titles, they can be considered, but you really shouldn't be driving any of your decisions off of job titles. You really need to have conversations and understand what the jobs are and what goes into it. So by example, let's not just assume that because somebody has a college degree, that they need to be paid more than the person that does not have a college degree, because the job in question may not require a college degree. So if you have two people, again, doing substantially equal work, and that college degree isn't playing into it, and it requires the same skill, effort, and responsibility as a position of somebody who does not have that, that does not necessarily mean that that person gets to be paid more. So again, it really goes down to looking at the specific job duties and making your decisions based off of those. So shortly following the EPA, we had the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, and this was in 1964. So similar, a little bit different. So Equal Pay Act covers employers of any size. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act covers employers with 15 or more employees, and it goes a little bit further. So it's prohibiting discrimination based on some additional characteristics. So not just sex, but sex, race, color, religion, and national origin. And it applies to more aspects of employment instead of just compensation that we were seeing with the EPA. So this is discrimination in firing, hiring, training. It can be, who you select for promotion, any other conditions of employment is kind of what this act is looking at. But similarly, you'll see that it's based on employees who are similarly situated across those bulleted items there. So tasks, skills, effort, responsibility, working conditions, and complexity. So again, when you're taking a look at the jobs within your organization, if you take steps towards pay transparency, you need to make sure that you're looking at the actual functions of jobs and the things that people are doing when you're starting to categorize your positions and figuring out how they kind of rank from a salary perspective. So again, unlawful to discriminate against somebody based on any of those protected classes that we talked about. So these were some of the earlier things, but obviously pay disparity is still a conversation today, right? We have not eradicated the issues of pay issues. We still see that minorities and women are being paid less than men for doing similar work. So obviously this was not enough, right? And so this is kind of what has driven some of the conversation more recently around pay transparency. So now we're going to talk a little bit closer to home. Ohio pay equity is pretty much a mashup of those two laws that we just talked about. So the Ohio pay equity laws are saying that employers cannot discriminate against individuals based on their race, color, religion, sex, age, national origin, or ancestry and pay them lower wages. Again, if they're working a job that has equal skill, effort, and responsibility and working conditions as somebody else. A few instances where differences in pay rates can be permissible, and this comes through the EPA as well. If it's based on seniority, if it's based on a merit system, if the pay differences are based on a system that measures, again, like the quantity or quality of production, those are all instances when variances in pay are okay. And then of course, the last one is kind of a catch-all. Any other factor that's not based on any of those protected classes can be considered okay. But employers, again, are not allowed to reduce the wages of the higher employee to make them line up with the lower paid employee as a way to comply with the law. Like that's never okay. You're always going to have to go the other way. So now to focus on a couple of municipalities in Ohio. So the first one is Toledo. So the Toledo pay transparency is made up of 2 areas. So there's disclosure of wages and there's a salary history ban. For the disclosure of wages, employers that are located in Toledo that have 15 or more employees in Toledo are required to provide pay scale for a position when an applicant has made a reasonable request or received a conditional offer of employment. So again, you're interviewing somebody and they request that salary range, you have to give it to them. You're giving them an offer, you have to give it to them. Again, a way a lot of places are getting ahead of this is just posting it with the job ad. That's really just the easiest thing to do, is just post it. And again, we'll talk in a few minutes about the benefits of doing that anyway. Toledo also has a salary history ban. So this is telling employers that they are not allowed to inquire about an applicant's salary history. They're not allowed to screen applicants based on their salary history. They cannot rely on that salary history when making determinations about whether they should hire somebody, or when they determining what their salary would be if they do want to give them an offer. And they cannot retaliate against an employee for refusing to share that information. Now, what's important to note here is that employers are allowed to talk about expectations. So the way to get around this is not to ask candidates, what did you make in your last job? Or please share your salary history. What you need to do is ask them what their salary expectations are for this job. What are you looking to make in your next job? What are the requirements, across your pay that we can talk about for this next position? And that is completely okay. And that's where the conversation needs to go. It doesn't matter what people made in the past. What matters is, what are their expectations now? And can you meet that as an employer? Or are they too high or are they under wherever it is that for what their needs are, because they know what they need to make in order to keep their regular cost of living and to keep up with the lifestyle that they have. So it's up to you guys to kind of have that conversation up front and meet in the middle. Looking at Cincinnati, Cincinnati is very similar to Toledo. So almost exactly the same. Again, 15 or more employees in Cincinnati, you have to be able to provide that pay scale for position if somebody asks for it or they get a conditional offer. Again, you can't be inquiring about it or making any decisions based on it. In Cincinnati, it says that the provisions do not apply when an applicant voluntarily or unprompted discloses what that salary history is to the employer. But again, my guidance to you would be, strike these as questions that you're ever asking in an interview. Strike these as questions that maybe you have in a pre-screen question or any part of your application process. Again, as more and more laws and legislation come into effect, it's just best to treat these as questions that you cannot be asking anybody and focus your conversations truly on what their expectations are in their next role.
Now, Tina, if I could chime in here with you quick. Now, the business itself has to be located in a Columbus address or this case, Cincinnati address, correct? Where it's not like if business can be in Worthington, they don't have to apply by these Columbus rules, correct?
So it's going to be based on where the employee is. And so we'll get to that a little bit too. So if your brick and mortar is, and we can go ahead and move over to Columbus, because I know that's going to be the one that hits home for most of you here on this call today. If your brick and mortar building is in Columbus, but you have somebody working remotely in Toledo or Cincinnati, at that threshold of that 15 or more employees, you have to comply. It doesn't matter if your business is headquartered there, but if you have enough employees that might be working in that area, again, maybe you've got a large amount of remote employees. If you're hitting that for these laws here, if you're hitting that threshold of 15 and they're in that area, you need to comply with it. And similarly, we'll get to this in another slide as well, but even when it comes to posting your jobs, you need to make sure that you're complying with those pay transparency laws in the areas where you're posting. So again, remote work is great, right? We're all kind of doing it. We've got that flexibility now post-COVID. A lot of places are still hiring remotely. You need to be really careful about making sure that you're complying with those laws about where you're actually posting the positions. But if we bounce back to Columbus real quick, so the Columbus pay transparency, this went into effect earlier this year. Hopefully this isn't news and you all already know about it. But there's this right now in effect is only a salary history ban. I've underlined some key points here because this is where it varies just a little bit from some of the other ones we just talked about. But again, 15 or more employees in the city of Columbus, you're prohibited from doing the following actions, but it's not just regarding wages, but again, more of a total comp approach like we talked about before. So talking about your benefits and other compensation. You can't be asking about those things either. So it's not like there's a loophole of saying, well, I can't ask about their base salary, but I'll see what did you make in commission, or what did you know, what was your vacation package? You can't be asking those questions. Again, what are their expectations moving forward? That's where you need to focus. And again, similar with the other ones, the conversations all just need to be focused on what those expectations are. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about, now that we've covered the legislation, you know, the next most important piece, I think, is really talking about the other benefits of pay transparency and why you want to do this, even if you don't have legislation that's requiring you to do it.
Yeah. And so applicant pool, increasing the number of applicants you have. Basically, if you're putting out the number of how much someone's going to make, they're going to want to apply more to that job because they know what it is. Candidate selection discourages people who wouldn't accept the salary offered from ever applying. Personally, I appreciate that, because if I see a job that's being listed out there that hey, I'm interested in this, but it says, or it doesn't tell me what I would be making, and then I go through everything at point where they offer me the job and I find out how much they're offering to pay me, and I find out that's actually a lot lower than what I was expecting. I feel now like I've wasted my time, I've wasted your time, something where no one wants to be at, because you definitely want to get someone hired sooner, get them on the job faster. And again, time is money, so you don't want to waste that time.
Right. Can I jump in, Jordan?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I've seen specifically with the clients that I support here at Ahola around this. So one of the things that we've had some clients that have been a little bit resistant to the pay transparency. They're not in an area that requires it. They've been a little bit hesitant to post their salary ranges. And at some point in time, we had a conversation about this, and this is something that's truly benefited them. So one of the issues they were having is they would start with a phone screen. So they would pick up the phone, they would call the individual, they would talk to them, ask a few questions, wrap up that conversation with asking them about what their salary expectations are, only to find that there was a huge gap between what they were able to offer the position and what the applicants were looking for. So they were wasting a lot of time on phone screens, only to find out that, again, the candidate was never going to be able to accept an offer from them anyway, because what they were offering was too low. The second side to this is really that even if you are not posting, sites like Indeed are going to be posting it for you, essentially. So they are going to go so far as to make suggestions and post it on there, like estimates. Like, we think this job is going to pay this much. And this was burning my clients as well, because again, whatever algorithm Indeed was using was spitting out ranges that were higher than what the actual range was. So I would look up the positions, I would show that to my clients and say, look, these algorithms are saying that they estimate you're going to be paying this. And that was causing a lot of people to apply that thought that this was a job that would meet their requirements when it truly wasn't. So they went ahead and started posting the ranges, and it has saved them so much time. So for one, again, as Jordan said, they're not getting these people applying that are wasting their time, wasting your time, because they see, oh, that job's too low, it doesn't pay enough for the comfort that I have and the salary that I need to make to support my family or to support my living style, whatever that might be. And almost every time when it gets to that conversation, that last question in the phone screen about asking about salary expectations, they're almost every once in a while somebody like applied without really looking, but the majority of the time people have already seen it and they're saying, yes, I'm comfortable with that range. So it has saved a lot of time just from a recruiting standpoint for those reasons alone. Thanks, Jordan.
Yeah, and just to add that, we all know how hard it is to find good candidates anyway. So again, why don't we just let them weed themselves out a little bit faster by with this transparency of the pay. For compliance, it encourages compliance with equal pay laws. So that kind of helps you right there. We're always here to be compliant, because if you're compliant, the less issues you have with the law, which is something that's always lovely. Internal impact, it reduces paranoia, if I could say that today, while enabling employees to see what they can look forward to, which I think is always great, because sometimes you hear people who talk back and forth. Well, you're making this, I'm making this, which you never want. That doesn't create a good environment. This way you don't have to deal with that anymore. and it helps encourage people to want to work for that next step to get up to that pay level that they saw. Pay gap, it promotes pay equality and helps identify and reduce the pay gaps, which, Tina just talked about. You don't want those pay gaps, and you want everything to be a little bit closer. Again, that helps not only for finding the right candidates, but keeping a good kind of environment between your employees. Reputation and trust, it builds trust with the employees and the candidates. Hey, I'm going to trust you a lot more if you're being honest with me about what the pay is that I could expect to make, then if you aren't really telling me, give me an idea, but then if you don't follow through with it.
Right. Just a couple
Anything else
extra
to add, Tina?
to add here. Yeah. So especially with the pay gaps and some of this internal impact, right? So and trust, these all kind of go hand in hand, because trust is going to speak volumes. The more that your employees trust your organization, that's going to help not only with their like productivity, but their job satisfaction. It's going to help with retention. When an individual believes that they're working for a company that is socially responsible, that is ethical, that is trustworthy, that speaks volumes. So that's not just something that helps with applicants and candidates, but that helps with the heart of your organization and keeping people there. And pay transparency helps with that in a couple of different ways. So when we're talking about these pay gaps, and again, in a couple slides, we're going to go through the steps on how you can implement it. I'll talk about this a little bit more then, but you're going to have to identify if you have any pay discrepancies and pay gaps. And as you kind of go through these exercises of, again, taking a look at your jobs, taking a look at how compensation decisions are made, cleaning that up, making it sure that everything is being based on objective criteria. That's going to help people get that trust. If they can understand how compensation is issued in your organization, how they can reach those next levels, the criteria that decisions are made on, that's going to help them feel better about their pay. Again, reducing that paranoia, making them understand what they can look forward to, what they need to do to get that next level of the organization. But it's going to help keep you more compliant. Again, if you're posting a fair salary range, when you put a job on Indeed and you post that on there, by posting it, not only are you sharing that information with candidates and people that are looking for that type of information, but you're holding yourself accountable. So now you've put out there publicly, this is the range that we're going to pay. And you're going to be expected to stick with it. So it's an extra layer to kind of hold you accountable and making sure that you're going to continue to pay people for the ranges that you say that you're going to be able to. And that's people are, again, and your internal folks are going to hold you accountable to that too. So it's just another way to kind of keep that balance with your organization. But that reputation and trust, I'm sure, as most of you know, is so important. And a lot of organizations, or a lot of candidates, as they apply to organizations, they're looking, again, a lot of like the Gen Z and the younger generations coming up, it's so important to them to work for companies that they can stand behind, that have a good reputation, that have good morale and good culture. It's not all about that base pay. So really think about those benefits as you're kind of working through what this can look like for your organization.
Perfect. I definitely agree with everything you just said. All right, so just another stat here, 82% of the US workers are more likely to consider applying to a job if the pay range is listed in the job opening. 100%. I've talked to friends, I've talked to other clients who said this for their own employees, and facts are facts. Again, you're going to get more applicants this way, and better applicants. Okay, so the challenges and solutions. So here are a couple challenges. The fear that the wage transparency will hurt recruiting when candidates see what other companies are offering. That's a fair challenge to come across, but some solutions with that: highlight other benefits and things that you offer: remote work, flexible time, and unique benefits. And definitely something that we're seeing often is that, especially let's say with the millennials, that's huge for a lot of people out there, working moms, having that, being able to work from home and flexible time. And I think you're going to have a lot more happy employees as well that way.
Right.
if you're being
And
honest with that
again,
part.
oh, sorry, Jordan.
No, go ahead.
Going back to some of the client examples, this is again another thing, because talking about some of those same clients, again, not always able, we're small businesses, right? We're not always able to offer top dollar. We can't always compete with the Googles and the Amazons and the other organizations out there. But what I have found is that a lot of my clients do have some unique benefits. And so highlight those again, especially going back to your job ad and during the interview and application process. Don't be afraid to talk about those things. Again, some people really want that pet insurance that maybe you're
Just think of that.
or again, flexible work, or understanding what the shift is. You know, I've talked to a lot of people where they're coming out of one industry going into another, and they're just tired of working nights and weekends. They really want that 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. So even just having that clear expectation on what hours are and when they're going to work, and that they have their weekends off to spend with their family or whatever it might be, you know, make sure that you're highlighting those things, because again, as Jordan said, you know, again, it's not just about the base wages, it's about the whole picture.
Definitely. So another challenge, employees who discover their compensation is lower than their peers may be upset. This can have a negative impact on the working environment, which again, totally understand that. But a solution to that would be to help the employees understand the factors that influence salary and decisions. If your pay decisions are based on legitimate factors, these should be much easier to explain to the employees. If somebody's more qualified, especially for the job, you can't change that. Basically, that's another way to get around it. Anything to add to that, Tina?
I mean, I could harp on this all day long. I think communication with your company is key, no matter what you're doing. Pay transparency, rolling out a new policy, you know, starting a new vacation program, whatever it is. Your communication with your employees is always so important within an organization, because people want to understand that they're part of the decision, they're part of the conversation, that there's somewhere they can go if they've got concerns. So helping employees understand the aspects that go into compensation are going to be important. That's going to help relieve a lot of that tension, a lot of that anxiety, a lot of that paranoia, if they just understand how the decisions are made and what criteria it's based on. Again, whether you're going back to a merit system, whether it's a seniority system, whether it's based on how many widgets they make during production, or again, whatever the criteria is that you set up, just having people understand that will speak volumes.
Another challenge, compliance concerns. Employees that are not aware of pay transparency laws in the states/cities in which they are recruiting employers, not employees. So a solution to that is be sure to do your research. Always do your research on everything. In the state you are posting your jobs. While some states may only cite you, others can issue fines. Can only cite you or issue fines. And this is huge. Like we always tell people, especially if you're looking for anything like out in California or New York, their rules are so much different for anything, that you definitely want to look before you maybe hire someone there or put down roots there. Anything to add?
Yeah, this goes back to that great question you had earlier, Jordan, in the conversation. I said we would kind of come back to it. So just because you're here in Ohio does not mean that you only have to apply to Ohio laws if you're looking to hire people in other states. So again, some states are much more restrictive on the things that you have to do. Again, a lot of them are going to require that the job range or the salary ranges be posted. They might have even more levels of legislature that you need to be aware of. So just, again, do your research before you start posting in New York or Colorado or just anywhere outside of where you're currently working. Make sure that you're just aware of what those laws are, because you can't just fall back and say, oh, well, I'm a business in Ohio. Well, that doesn't matter, because as soon as you start recruiting specifically in other areas outside, you need to start complying with their laws, and you're playing by their rules now.
And when you're doing that research, I would highly recommend looking for someone who is certified in HR. Reach out to your payroll company if they have that, because they're the ones that have the knowledge, because obviously you can Google anything, but lots of things can say. Google tells you a lot of stuff, and sometimes they don't go together. So I highly recommend, or your lawyer, things like that, to look into that. So one of the last challenges, companies that are cited or fined for non-compliance could be creating trust and reputation issues. So a solution for that is post realistic ranges. Stay up to date on the laws, get ahead of the issues as a whole. And Tina and I were talking about this earlier, and I know she has some really good examples of this. Yes, there's obviously ways that you can get around this by posting certain ranges, but you would always want to be compliant. So Tina, I'm gonna let you go a little bit more into that.
Yeah, so I think some organizations try to get creative in looking for loopholes. And instead of just applying the law as it's meant to be applied, they're applying it based on exactly how it's written. And what I mean by that is some organizations will post very unrealistic ranges or unattainable ranges where they say that the base salary for a position might be $40,000 to $100,000. And we all know that's not the case. Sure, it's somewhere in there, but that doesn't help the situation. That doesn't narrow it down for candidates. And really, you're going to be doing yourself a disservice by doing that, because people are going to wonder what you're up to, right? If you're posting a range is that large. Now, of course, there can be situations where maybe the position is eligible for commission, right? And that commission can swing high or low based on how successful that employee is in that role. Talk more specifically about that, right? That's not necessarily the base salary that we're talking about when you're posting those ranges. Either way, there's probably a base salary component with increases, based on commission, based on what they sell. And you can be more transparent about that. But I urge people to be cautious when they're posting these ranges to, again, do so realistically, do so with the spirit of what these laws are meant to do, and how they're meant to drive some of that pay equity. Because again, people are going to read between the lines, and you're going to do yourself more of a disservice than a service by trying to kind of skirt around these things. Similarly, technology is here to help or break you depending on which way of this avenue you're going to go. So there's going to be sites like Glassdoor where your employees can go and they can post their salary anonymously. They can say what they're making. People can do their research and they can find things out. So again, the more open and honest you are with your employees, keeping them happy, and then being transparent with your candidates is only going to benefit you.
And I was going to say, it takes it back to that trust issue we were talking about before. People want to work for an honest, truthful company, and they can't trust you because you're giving that big of a range. When you're applying, or when they're looking to apply, they're going to move on fast, and you might miss a really amazing candidate.
Absolutely. So finally, we're going to talk quickly about how to implement pay transparency. So before you even go down the road to start implementing pay transparency, if you're not doing something like this at your organization today, is to really think about the goals of what you're trying to achieve. So is the goal simply to comply with the law? Is your goal to try to, again, build morale within your organization by establishing more trust? Whatever it is, you want to just make sure that you're keeping that goal in mind as you kind of start to take step towards this. So again, if your goal is to make sure that there's equality, then you need to make sure that you're going to be taking a look at, which I would encourage anyway, and identifying any disparities and eradicating those within your organization before moving forward with any of the following steps of pay transparency. If you're really looking to try to kind of increase that trust and boost morale, maybe you have conversations with your staff about the level of pay transparency that they're comfortable with. One thing that we kind of talked about is some people having that paranoia or that resistance. So understanding even from your staff, are they comfortable with full transparency, or what would be something that would make them feel comfortable within the organization? And if your end goal is full transparency, you always want to start with partial transparency and kind of take those steps to work towards that full transparency at the end. But anyway, you want to, again, make sure that you're identifying in your organization why you want to take these steps, and then work towards them. So the first one that I'm going to recommend is doing some sort of needs assessment, some sort of pay gap audit. So this goes back to taking a look for any inconsistencies and looking at the jobs themselves, as we talked about earlier in the presentation today. So really review the jobs. Sometimes in HR or in the other positions that some of you might be in, we're a little bit further removed from what people might be doing all day, every day. And we might think we know, but maybe things have changed. Jobs shift. responsibilities change. So it's always beneficial to check back in with your managers and even sometimes your first line employees and understanding what are they actually doing on a day-to-day, what skills are needed, what are they doing, understanding those jobs, making sure that they're banded correctly. And that, again, you're treating similar jobs the same. So jobs that are substantially equal, that are similar across that work, across those efforts and responsibilities, and making sure that you're paying them accordingly. So that's going to be your first step. And then as you identify, again, inconsistencies or pay gaps, you're going to want to make sure that you adjust those, because what you really don't want is to recognize that somebody's being paid lower than the band you think they should be in, but maybe you go ahead and you need to hire for somebody else on that team and you post that job with that new range, and that person meets all of that criteria, and they're going to see that posted, and they're going to come to you knocking on your door and wondering why they're not being paid what you're hiring somebody externally to do. So these are conversations that you need to be prepared to have, which is why doing this analysis up front and rectifying any issues is going to be crucial before taking some of these more transparency steps that we're going to talk about. So the next is talking about your salary decision process. So hopefully you have a process in place today. If not, this is where you want to take a step and create something to, again, make sure that your salary decisions are based on objective criteria. Again, the effort and responsibility, maybe jobs require certain certifications to actually work at the next level. So identifying what those certifications are. Or again, maybe you're in a position where everybody's doing the same thing, but they earn their next step in pay based on their tenure with their company, the seniority. Whatever it is, making sure that it's objective, it's not based on opinion, and writing down what it is so that it's clear on what your policy is. And then the next step is going to be communicating that with your employees. So we talked about this a little bit too, making sure that you're open and communicative with your employees. If they understand how compensation decisions are made, they're going to feel better about it overall. And they're going to understand what they need to do to get to that next level in your organization. But take it further. I know that these are uncomfortable conversations and there's a little bit of taboo around it, but just encourage that open conversation. Give people avenues to bring concerns forward if they find them or they have them. And then next, we're going to talk about leadership involvement. So this is super important. Every leader and manager in your organization should understand this process. So they should understand how salary decisions are made. They should understand what your policy is. Because sometimes employees don't feel comfortable talking to HR about these things. Or maybe, again, whoever else might be working in that position within your organization, if you don't have an HR representative, they might be going to their manager. And should managers be having every single compensation discussion? Maybe not, but they should be able to speak confidently about what the process is. So if I have my annual pay review and I get my increase and I go talk to my manager and ask why I didn't have more, or to explain to me, why I'm making the amount that I'm making, they should be able to speak confidently to at least some part of the process and understand how those decisions were made and why, and be able to talk to me about how I can elevate myself in the organization. And managers should always at least have some knowledge around, again, how people can be promoted, how they can move to that next stage to be able to continue to have career conversations with their employees. And then finally, use technology. Don't do it all yourself. There is a lot of stuff out there that can help you, a lot of benchmarking tools that can help give you information. Again, because if you just go, as Jordan said, you can get just about anything off of Google. But you want to be working with reputable sites and reputable organizations to get your benchmarking data and to help you kind of manage your compensation as you work through it. So where I kind of want to leave you today is take steps, right? Pay transparency is a big process. It's something that you want to work towards. But before you start doing anything externally, start taking a look internally. Again, identify any gaps, rectify those gaps, communicate with your employees and your managers so that they have a clear understanding of how these processes work. And then you'll start to kind of see the benefits of pay transparency, and never assume that this is a one and done process. This should be something that's done over time. Like doing these audits, like don't just do it today, think that you're good to go for the next 10 years, because things happen, things change, and you really want to make sure that you're, again, staying ahead of any disparities that could be creeping in. So making sure that you're regularly reviewing these topics with your employees and your managers, and that you're regularly auditing yourself to make sure that you're the strongest organization you can be.
Well, thank you. We do have one question, and I know you've talked about a rollout, but I'm going to ask if, when we think about it, especially through the lens of like a smaller business, um,
Mhm.
where people are very familiar with one another on lots of levels. The question is written is actually, and again, you've addressed some of this, but could you address how to roll out total pay transparency to a company sharing the compensation for every team member? This person says, I imagine various team members would have different reactions to having their pay visible to others. And how do we get buy in from everyone before publishing everyone's salaries? So, thinking about that in general, and also maybe through the lens of a smaller organization.
Yeah, so again, full transparency it's always going to be harder than partial transparency. And especially again, as we talked about, people younger generations coming in are kind of rallying around this more than maybe some of the older generations where again having these conversations was considered a little bit more taboo, and people were a little bit more uncomfortable. You didn't talk about your pay with anybody else, you kept it to yourself. So that's something that you kind of have to balance. So if you are working towards full transparency, that's something you want to do. Those conversations with your employees are going to be super important as you work towards it. By no means would I say just do it, right? You want to start having regular conversations and touching base with people. If you're not sure if you want to go the full transparency route, one of the things we talked about earlier was, maybe gauging how your organization feels. Would they feel comfortable with this? Now, typically you're not necessarily posting Tina makes this, Jordan makes this, but it might be an HR consultant, salary range is this, a senior sales executive, salary range is this. Now people can, especially in a small organization, to your point, Kelly, they can fill in the gaps, right? People know what other people's job titles are. But those could be some other steps too, right? Maybe posting the ranges for the different positions as opposed to like names in exactly what they're making. There's a couple of different ways that you can do it, but you are going to want to check in with your organization and just, I guess, see how people feel. If there's resistance, understanding why. I always encourage in any type of conversation to go in curious. Don't go in assuming that you know why somebody feels a certain way about something. Ask questions. So what is their resistance? Why are they concerned? What is it that's making them feel that way? What would make them feel better about it? And have those open conversations about it. And some people might not ever get there, but if the goal of your organization is to get there, then, hopefully over time you can kind of encourage them again as you take these partial pay transparency steps, eventually getting to that full, hopefully getting them to a point where they're going to feel a little bit more comfortable and understanding the overall benefits as an organization.
Thank you for that. Really great conversation today, as always, with our friends from Ahola. Just a couple takeaways that I had, and I hope all of you that are attending this call have had some really great nuggets to take away as well. But I love the idea of asking about salary expectations during the process. I mean, that's a great way to be able to kind of gauge where people are, what they need, and to determine if this would be a good fit for them. And such a better use of the applicant's time as well as those within the organization that are trying to fill this position. And also, even if you're not putting things out about your pay ranges, others will be doing so. You mentioned Indeed, and the algorithms that they're using, and it can be wildly off, like what the actual pay range is. So kind of taking control of that on our own so that we're getting in front of that, I thought was really important. And I agree so much with this statistic of 82% of workers are likely to apply to positions, or not likely to apply to positions when pay ranges are not listed. So if I don't see the pay range, about 82% of people are going to pass on that anyway. So why not have it out there in front, so that people can make good informed decisions? So thank you, Tina, Jordan, and everyone on the call with us today. Such important information. And thanks for being with us. And we hope to see you guys soon again at another chamber event. Everyone take care and be well.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course.
Hey guys.
Bye.